Emergency doctors were unable to save the millionaire's wife, who felt unwell in the restaurant. Minutes later, the waitress ran to help, and everyone froze at what she did. The night had enveloped the Cascades restaurant in Santa Fe, a place known for its discreet luxury and exquisite cuisine. Patricia and Roberto had just toasted to their wedding anniversary, but the clinking of their glasses sounded more like an end than a celebration. Patricia observed her surroundings with a restless gaze. Meanwhile, Roberto maintained a mysterious expression, almost rehearsed. "You don't seem happy, dear. Is there something wrong with the food?" Roberto asked, leaning over the table with a forced smile, but his eyes did not convey the same warmth. "Roberto, I feel like someone is watching me. Did you notice anything strange tonight?" Patricia murmured, her eyes nervously scanning the room. Her voice was low, pressured by an inexplicable anxiety. Roberto responded with a calm smile, trying to diffuse her concerns. "Love, we're just enjoying a good meal. Relax and try to enjoy it. Everything is fine." He reached across the table, attempting to offer comfort with his touch. Patricia tried to smile, but the unease lingered. She picked up her fork and tried to focus on her food, but every bite was a battle against the nausea that was starting to build. "I think the shrimp isn't good," she said, placing the fork back on the plate with a soft clink. "Let me call the waiter. They can bring you something else," Roberto offered, discreetly signaling one of the staff. The service's efficiency was impeccable, but the concern in Roberto's eyes was evident as he watched Patricia struggle with her growing discomfort. As the waiter approached, Patricia leaned on the table, her pale face contrasting with the golden lighting. "I don't feel well, Roberto. Something is wrong." "It's not just the shrimp," she whispered, her voice weak, almost lost among the sounds of conversations and laughter around them. "Ma'am, do you need something? Can I help with anything?" The waiter intervened with professional concern, looking alternately between Patricia and Roberto. Roberto squeezed Patricia's hand, trying to convey reassurance. "Please bring some water and maybe something for nausea. Quickly, please," he instructed, keeping his voice calm, though his eyes fixed on Patricia betrayed growing fear. "Of course, right away, sir," the waiter replied, quickly walking away to fulfill the request. Patricia tried to compose herself, taking deep breaths. "Roberto, it feels like this isn't just a simple upset stomach." She couldn't finish the sentence, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. "We'll take care of you, Patricia, no matter what it is. We'll figure this out," Roberto affirmed, holding her hands firmly. The gazes of other diners began to turn toward the unfolding scene as Roberto held his wife's hand. Patricia felt one last flash of clarity. "Roberto, why?" she whispered before darkness completely overtook her. As Patricia's words faded, Roberto held her hand with an urgency that seemed to carry more than just concern. He looked around frantically, noticing that the other diners at the Cascades restaurant were now focused on them, their expressions a mix of curiosity and alarm. "Stay with me, Patricia. Please," Roberto implored, his voice choked with tension. He vigorously signaled the waiter, who was already returning with a glass of water and a small first aid kit. The waiter's expression was one of alarm as he placed the water on the table and opened the kit, searching for something that might help. "We have antacids and allergy medications here, sir. She ate shrimp, right? Could she be allergic? These might help until we get her to the hospital." Roberto looked at him urgently, but his hand trembled as he took the antacid. "Give it to her now, quickly." His authority left no room for hesitation, and he attempted to place the pill on Patricia's now pale lips. As Patricia struggled to swallow, her consciousness wavered between light and dark. She managed to open her eyes briefly, looking at Roberto with a mixture of confusion and fear. "What's happening to me?" she managed to murmur, her voice weak, barely audible over the growing murmur of the other diners. Roberto caressed her face, trying to offer a reassuring smile that didn't reach his own eyes, which remained filled with unspoken fear. "Everything will be okay, my love. I'm here with you. I'll take you to the hospital now." He turned to the waiter, who was still standing nearby, watching the scene with obvious concern. "Call an ambulance immediately and ask someone to control the crowd. We need space," Roberto ordered, his voice firm despite the chaotic situation. The waiter nodded and quickly walked away, pulling out his phone as he began giving orders to other restaurant staff. Meanwhile, Patricia, now a little more conscious, gripped Roberto's hand with surprising strength. "Roberto, I don't understand. This doesn't feel right." I know, Roberto responded, his eyes scanning the room as if looking for someone or something that could explain the situation. "But I'm here, Patricia. We're not going to let this beat us." Around them, the restaurant had transformed. What had once been an atmosphere of celebration and joy now felt like a stage set for worry and fear. Other diners were standing up, some approaching to offer help, while others simply watched from a distance, whispering theories and concerns. "Please, everyone, stay in your places. Help is on the way," the waiter shouted, trying to maintain order. But the tension only grew as Roberto held Patricia, waiting for the ambulance to arrive. He whispered words of comfort, but his mind was racing, replaying every moment of the night, trying to understand where things had gone so wrong. The situation at the Cascades restaurant was deteriorating rapidly. Roberto held tightly to Patricia's hand, whose breathing was becoming increasingly irregular and labored. The murmurs of the surrounding diners had turned into worried whispers, and all eyes were now on the unfolding drama. "I can't breathe properly, Roberto." Patricia's voice was weak, almost a whisper, as she struggled to draw air. Her eyes were wide with fear as reality began to close in around her. "I'm here, Patricia. Hold on, please." Roberto tried to stay calm, but the anxiety was evident on his face. He looked around, searching for any additional assistance while waiting for the ambulance. "Sir, are you sure she's not allergic?" the waiter asked, already assessing Patricia's breathing. "She might be going into anaphylactic shock. We need epinephrine now." Roberto quickly nodded at the waiter, who was already running toward the kitchen. "In the first aid kit, quickly," the waiter shouted to the restaurant staff. The restaurant, once a place of celebration, had become the scene of a medical emergency. As the waiter disappeared to fetch the medication, Patricia began to convulse slightly, her erratic movements adding a new level of urgency to the situation. Roberto tried to keep Patricia's airways clear. "What's happening to her?" Roberto asked, as he tried to assist his wife amid the spasms, confusion, and terror evident in his voice. "You're going to be fine. We're doing everything we can," Roberto told Patricia, his voice trembling as he held her, trying to stabilize her. He couldn't help but look around. The waiter returned, panting, with an epinephrine auto-injector. Without hesitation, Roberto took the injector, quickly prepared it, and administered it to Patricia's thigh, hoping the medication would quickly stabilize her breathing. After a few tense moments, Patricia's breathing remained unstable. She was still weak and pale. "The ambulance is on its way. Hold on, Roberto," the waiter assured him, trying to hide his own uncertainty about the cause of the incident. The ambulance finally arrived to pick up the patient. Roberto knew she was close to death. "She will need more care at the hospital," he said, looking seriously at one of the paramedics. "The epinephrine didn't work." "My wife isn't allergic to shrimp," Roberto explained. "It must have been a sudden illness." As Patricia was being wheeled on a stretcher toward the ambulance, Roberto followed beside her, promising her that everything would be fine in the end. The sound of the ambulance siren pierced the night silence as it sped through the streets of Santa Fe toward the nearest hospital. Roberto accompanied Patricia in the back of the ambulance, holding her hand, which seemed more fragile with every passing minute. The flashing lights of the sirens illuminated her face, showing a paleness that made him increasingly worried. "Can you hear me, Patricia? We're almost there," Roberto said, trying to keep his voice firm to convey reassurance. Patricia, her eyes half closed, only nodded weakly, struggling to stay conscious. The paramedic beside her monitored her vital signs, adjusting the oxygen flow. "We're doing everything we can to keep her stable," he commented, noting Roberto's growing anxiety. The hospital is already prepared to receive her as soon as we arrive." Roberto looked at the paramedic, his expression a mix of gratitude and despair. "She's never had health problems like this before. She's never had allergies," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else in the ambulance. The ambulance abruptly turned another corner, nearing the hospital. The speed of the journey made everything seem like a blur to Roberto, whose thoughts revolved around what could have caused Patricia's sudden illness. Upon arrival, the medical team was already waiting at the emergency entrance. Patricia was quickly transferred to a stretcher and taken inside with urgency, while Roberto followed behind, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach. "Please let me go with her," he implored the nurses. "You can accompany her to the waiting room. We'll take care of her," a nurse replied, guiding him down a brightly lit hallway to a space where other families were waiting for news about their loved ones. Sitting there, Roberto felt like every second dragged on endlessly. He replayed every detail of the night in his mind, trying to identify any sign he might have missed, something that would explain Patricia's unexpected collapse. How could this happen? He wondered over and over again, his mind unable to settle after the rapid spiral of events. "Sir, the doctor will update you as soon as we have more information," the nurse informed him, noticing Roberto's agitated state. She offered him a glass of water, which he accepted automatically, though his eyes remained fixed on the door through which Patricia had disappeared. Roberto stood up, pacing back and forth in the waiting room. With each step, he felt a mix of anger and helplessness. The wait seemed endless, each minute stretching into hours. Roberto stopped pacing, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath, trying to find some semblance of calm. Marta, the hospital's cleaning supervisor, was quietly passing through the hallway near the surgical center when the commotion began. Doctors were rushing toward the emergency room where a woman had been brought in. The professionals had tense, focused expressions. She couldn't help but overhear the quick and urgent commands they exchanged. "She's still crashing. We need more blood bags now," shouted one of the doctors as the nurses ran to follow the orders. The emergency room door opened and closed, allowing glimpses of a chaotic scene inside. Marta pushed her cart against the wall to make way but was too curious to leave. She knew the look of concern. She had seen it in many people before, but something about the urgency of that night seemed different, more desperate. Inside the room, the doctors moved around Patricia with frantic efficiency. "She's not responding to treatment." A young doctor's voice was heard, clearly frustrated. "Let's try another dose of epinephrine." Marta watched for a moment, her instincts telling her that something was out of the ordinary. "The patient is dying. There's nothing more we can do," said one of the doctors. Marta remembered a similar incident that happened back in her community. Driven by impulse, she quickly checked her cart, finding a vial of antidote she had stored and forgotten in her bag. She used to keep medicines and teas in her belongings just in case of an emergency. Without hesitation, she entered the room, surprising everyone with her presence. "I have something that might help," Marta exclaimed, holding the vial up high. The doctors initially looked at her with surprise and then annoyance at the interruption. "This is an antidote for specific poisonings. I remembered a similar case," she quickly explained, feeling the pressure of the moment. The senior doctor hesitated, his expression showing doubt and desperation. "Do something. She's dying," Marta urged the doctor, her voice cutting through the tension in the air. With a reluctant nod from the doctor, he approached, opened the vial, and administered the antidote into Patricia's vein. The following seconds seemed to stretch infinitely as everyone in the room watched the monitors. Gradually, Patricia's vital signs began to stabilize, her breathing becoming more regular, and color started to return to her face. A sigh of relief was heard throughout the room. "Incredible! How did you know?" one of the doctors asked, looking at Marta with a mixture of admiration and surprise. "Sometimes, it's just instinct," Marta replied, a tired smile forming on her lips. She knew she had taken a big risk, but the relief of seeing the patient recovering confirmed her action. Marta left the room as the doctors regained their energy, ensuring Patricia's complete recovery. As she left, She looked back one last time, feeling satisfied that she had done the right thing. She read the patient's name on the chart, saving Patricia's name in her memory to pray for her the next morning. The next morning at the hospital brought a heavy atmosphere for Marta. Despite the miracle that had occurred the previous night, the hospital administration did not see the situation with the same gratitude she had expected. Marta was summoned to the hospital director's office as soon as she arrived. The director was a strict man known for his rigid adherence to the rules. As she entered the office, Marta felt the weight of each step. The director, seated behind his large desk, watched her with a look that did not promise good news. "Marta, your actions last night were extraordinarily brave but extremely reckless. You're not a doctor. You don't have the authorization to administer any kind of medication," he began, his voice firm and leaving no room for arguments. Marta, still standing in front of the director's desk, swallowed hard. "I understand, sir, but I couldn't just stand by while the woman was dying. I knew what the antidote could do," she replied, her voice a mix of defense and remorse. "I understand your point of view, but the rules are here for a reason. We can't just ignore them. Your actions could have caused more harm than good. You're dismissed from your duties here at the hospital. We can no longer work with you," the director declared, leaving no room for further discussion. Marta felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "Fired? But I saved her life," she tried to argue, but the director was already motioning for her to leave. As she left the office, Marta felt a mixture of emotions. Relief for having saved a life, but fear of the unknown future. How will I pay my bills? What will I do now? She wondered as she walked down the hallway she had so often walked with her cart to deliver meals to patients. As she passed by the waiting room, she saw a man waiting for news about a patient's condition. Their eyes met, and for a moment, she considered breaking down in tears right there, aware that she would never be able to work there again. She loved the hospital. She had dedicated so many years to that place. Roberto approached with an intense look toward the cleaning supervisor. "Your name is Marta, right? I'm the husband of the patient, Patricia, whom you intervened with yesterday in the operating room. My name is Roberto. I've heard what you did, and I can't believe it. What were you thinking? You could have killed Patricia with your irresponsibility." His voice was low but loaded with barely contained anger. "Your actions were reckless and unacceptable." Marta took a step back, surprised and hurt by the intensity of his reaction. "I really believed I was helping. Everything indicated that she would recover well after taking the antidote." Marta tried to argue, feeling her heart race. "You're not a doctor," Roberto interrupted, raising his voice, attracting curious looks from passers-by. "You have no right to make medical judgments no matter what you thought. You acted out of line and that's unacceptable. You could have killed my wife," he said. Roberto's words cut Marta deeper than the dismissal itself. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she fought to keep them under control. "I understand. I'm very sorry," she murmured, feeling small and isolated in the hallway now filled with whispers. Roberto gave her one last stern look before turning and walking toward the patient rooms, leaving Marta alone with her thoughts and the weight of her choices. With heavy steps, she walked toward the hospital exit, each step resonating with the cost of her impulsive decision. Marta was raised in an old family of healers. She knew what she was doing. The doctors had already given up on Patricia. If Marta had stayed still, the woman would have died. Although the patient's husband's words were harsh, she did not regret what she had done. It was a life and she saved it, just as the women in her family had done many times. As she crossed the hospital doors for the last time, Marta felt desolate but still sure she had tried to do the right thing. However, a suspicion began to torment her as she left. As Marta stood in the hospital entrance, doubt and distrust germinated in her mind. Her familiarity with healing practices, inherited from a long line of healers, made her question the true nature of Patricia's crisis. What if it was more than just an allergic reaction? What if someone really wanted to harm her? That antidote only worked in cases of poisoning. When I heard the symptoms, I remembered some cases I saw in my family's community. The antidote worked for several ailments, but her reaction seemed as if she had been poisoned, thought Marta, unable to shake the knot of suspicion growing in her chest. Determined, she stopped, turned, and looked toward the hospital's large building, whose imposing facade now seemed like an indifferent giant to the small human tragedies unfolding daily in its hallways. If someone tried to kill her, they would try again once they knew she was alive. I can't let that happen. I can't allow them to try again, she murmured to herself, deciding to act before it was too late. Marta turned around and went back to the hospital. She went to the locker room and put on a nurse's uniform she found hanging on a hook. Remembering that nurses used to keep their clothes in the hospital lockers, she put on a surgical mask and glasses that helped conceal her face. Her appearance was confident, but inside, fear and urgency pulsed with every step. She skillfully avoided acquaintances, avoiding direct contact as she headed to Patricia's room. Lord, I hope I'm making the right decision. Help me save this woman. She prayed without hesitation on her way to the woman she had saved. Upon entering the room, she found Patricia alone, looking weak but stable, a sight that brought both relief and urgency to Marta. Patricia, she began softly, approaching the bed. My name is Marta. We don't have time to talk now, but I need you to trust me. You're not safe here. Patricia, with squinting eyes, looked at Marta, and a hint of astonishment seemed to cross her face. Marta, who are you? What's going on? Her voice was a hoarse whisper, fragile like paper. We don't have time for explanations now, but I believe someone tried to take your life. Someone might try to harm you again. I'll take you to a safe place, said Marta, checking the hallways with the corner of her eye before starting to disconnect Patricia from the monitors with trained but slightly trembling hands. Patricia, though confused, seemed to trust Marta's look and did not scream. Marta quickly arranged a wheelchair, helped Patricia sit down, and began pushing her out of the room. Each turn in the hallways felt like an eternity. Every glance from a patient seemed like a potential threat. Upon reaching the service exit, mainly used by employees for deliveries and less visible procedures, Marta looked around, ensuring the path was clear. We're almost there, she whispered, more to herself than to Patricia as she pushed the wheelchair towards the street where her car was parked. Inside the car, with Patricia lying in the back seat, Marta started the engine and drove away from the hospital, her heart racing. I'll find out what's going on, she promised as she drove toward her modest home, an improvised refuge but one that for now offered the safety Patricia needed. As the city passed by the window, Marta felt the weight of her decision. She knew the consequences could be severe, but the conviction that she was doing the right thing kept her firm. It was a race against time, and Marta was determined to protect at all costs, even without knowing who they were facing. Marta drove her car through the quiet streets until she reached her small house in a modest part of the city. The simple construction, with its small front garden, seemed like a sanctuary far from the hospital's chaos. Patricia was lying in the back seat, still weak, but the expression of fear had softened a bit with the promise of safety. As soon as they arrived, Marta helped Patricia into the house and made her comfortable in bed. You can rest here. I'll take care of you, said Marta, covering Patricia with a light blanket. The simplicity of the place seemed to welcome the patient, who observed everything with a tired but curious look. Thank you, Marta. Oh, but why are you doing this? Who are you really? Patricia asked, her voice still weak but laden with gentle urgency. The question was fair, reflecting the surrealism of her situation. Marta sat next to her, hesitating for a moment before answering. I come from a family of healers. I grew up learning about herbs and antidotes. When I heard what was happening to you in the operating room, something told me it was more than just a common allergic reaction. I couldn't stand still. The doctors were losing you, so I acted. The director didn't like what I did and fired me, but if I'm right, you could be in danger. So, it's important that I brought you here, Marta explained, her eyes briefly diverting as if still surprised by her own audacity. Patricia listened attentively, a trace of admiration emerging on her face. And now you've lost your job because of me? She murmured, guilt tinging her words. I don't know how to thank you for what you did. You saved me. Thank you, she said. I chose to help you, Marta quickly replied, smiling to soften her words. But I'm worried about what comes next. I need to find out who did this to you before they try again. Over the following days, Marta took care of Patricia, giving her teas and medicines, seeing the woman improve each day. The hospital had announced that the patient had fled the hospital, so Marta knew she had been careful in removing the patient. Now, she felt Patricia would be safe since no one knew where she was. One quiet afternoon, while they were having tea in the kitchen, Patricia revealed more about her life with Roberto after listening to Marta talk about the argument they had at the hospital. He's always been so attentive. Roberto must be very worried about all this. I'm sorry for how he spoke to you. He was just scared. We've been together since high school. He knew I was involved in something serious at work. I think he suspected what happened to me, she explained. Marta looked at her questioningly, and then Patricia continued her explanation. You know, Marta, sometimes I feel so uncomfortable there at work. The looks, the whispers. It feels like someone is always trying to bring me down, Patricia confided, looking out the window with a distant expression. Marta listened attentively, each detail increasing her concern. Do you think someone at work might have a reason to harm you? She asked, trying to probe without pressing too much. Patricia sighed, a shadow of doubt crossing her face. I don't know, but there's a person, Laura, who has always wanted my position. She has never hidden it. Sometimes I think she would do anything to see me out of the company. Marta reflected on that, pondering the possible threats without revealing the complexity of her own suspicions. It's important to consider all possibilities, Patricia. We need to be careful, she advised, feeling the weight of the responsibility she now carried. In the following days, as Patricia regained her strength, she and Marta spent long hours discussing various topics, from happy memories to the challenges they faced. The conversation flowed naturally, and Marta's house was filled with laughter, and occasionally with tears. One night, while they were preparing dinner together, Patricia talked more about her interactions with Laura. She's always been very competitive, you know, and lately, she seemed even more intense, as if she was planning something. She knew I would have dinner with my husband and that I was happy. She even offered me a glass of champagne to celebrate the dinner. The sudden change in behavior seemed strange to me. Marta, while cutting vegetables, paused for a moment, absorbing that information. And you drank. A subtle suspicion began to form in her mind, although she tried not to jump to conclusions. Yes, of course. It seemed like a truce moment. It was strange. She was so kind to me all of a sudden, replied Patricia, unaware of the course of Marta's thoughts. The conversation led Marta to careful reflection as the two women shared the meal. Marta's mind worked, pondering the next steps. She knew she needed to be cautious, especially now that the suspicions pointed in a direction she hadn't considered before. While Patricia continued recovering in Marta's modest house, the cleaner became increasingly intrigued by everything her new friend was saying. One morning, after ensuring that Patricia was well enough for her to be absent, Marta decided it was time to act. I'm going to do some research today, she said to Patricia while preparing breakfast. We need to better understand what really happened. Patricia, apprehensive but grateful, nodded. Be careful, Marta. I don't know what or who is involved in all this, but I feel that the person who did this is very dangerous, she said. Marta dressed discreetly, opting for clothes that would not attract attention. She headed to the company where Patricia worked, determined to investigate Laura without raising suspicions. Upon arrival, she pretended to be an external human resources consultant conducting an employee satisfaction survey, an excuse that gave her access to the company's floors without arousing suspicion. During her visit, Marta carefully observed the work environment. She noticed the tension in the employees' faces, perhaps a reflection of the competitive atmosphere Patricia had described. While looking for Laura, she finally found her in a meeting through frosted glass. Laura seemed involved, discussing with lively gestures that denoted her competitive personality. Waiting patiently until the meeting ended, Marta approached Laura with a mix of courtesy and firmness. Hello, I'm a human resources consultant, and I'm here to better understand the work environment. Can I have a moment of your time? Marta proposed, maintaining her disguise. Laura, surprised but always ready to impress potential consultants, agreed. Sure, let's go to my office. As they walked, Marta asked general questions about the company culture, observing Laura's body language and responses carefully. Nothing in Laura's behavior suggested immediate guilt. She spoke of her passion for work and her aspirations. But there was a calculated coldness in her words. How do you deal with competition here? Marta asked, observing Laura's reaction. Laura laughed lightly, a polished response at the tip of her tongue. It's a competitive environment, of course. We all want to move forward, but I believe in playing fair. Sometimes people misinterpret ambition. Marta thanked Laura for her time and left the company with more questions than answers. On the way back, she reflected on the interaction. Laura didn't seem like someone capable of a crime. However, something in the woman's tone left Marta unsettled. Maybe it's not her, or maybe she's very good at hiding it, Marta thought, deciding she needed more information before forming any definitive conclusions. Upon returning, Marta shared her observations with Patricia, who listened attentively. It's hard to say, Marta. Laura has always been ambitious, but to go from that to doing what you suspect, I don't know, Patricia said. Both knew they needed more evidence before they could really understand what was happening. After sharing her findings about Laura with Patricia and not finding concrete evidence of her guilt, Marta began to question other possibilities. The conversation with Patricia left her uneasy. The mention that Roberto had always known about the challenges in Patricia's work and his protective behavior could hide more than concern. Determined to explore all avenues, Marta decided it was time to take a closer look at Roberto. Maybe there's something we're missing, Marta murmured as she planned her next move. Dressing discreetly, Marta followed Roberto one day after he left the house for work, keeping a safe distance, wearing dark glasses and a hat to avoid being recognized. Roberto seemed like an ordinary man on his way to work, but Marta wasn't fooled by the apparent normality. Roberto entered an office building. Marta waited outside, pondering her options. After a few minutes, she decided to enter the building, pretending to be lost. Inside, she noticed Roberto from afar. He was talking on the phone in a cafe in the company's lobby. She couldn't hear the conversation, but Roberto's serious expression and intense gestures indicated that the matter was grave. Waiting for him to walk away, Marta approached the counter, ordering coffee while trying to catch fragments of his conversation. Roberto mentioned something about ensuring that everything was resolved and that no traces were left. Additionally, she managed to catch that he was talking to a lawyer, as he mentioned wills and documents that seemed important for a possible defense. Marta felt a chill upon hearing those words. Marta watched as Patricia's husband ended the call and returned to the parking lot without going to his office after the conversation. Frustrated but still determined, Marta turned her attention back to Roberto. Marta followed Roberto and entered his car, parked near Patricia's. She noticed him checking something in the trunk. Curiosity overcame her caution, and she watched attentively to see what Roberto was handling. He took out what appeared to be a small bottle and a set of documents. Before she could see more, Marta had to hide as Roberto started looking around, clearly feeling watched. When Roberto finally returned to the company, Marta decided to check what he had handled in the car. Carefully, she took a handkerchief from her bag to avoid tampering with any evidence and opened the car's trunk. Inside, she found a medical prescription and a note mentioning Patricia's name. The prescription was for a substance that could easily be used to poison someone, especially if mixed with alcohol. Now, with the evidence in hand, Marta felt torn. Could someone have planted this here to incriminate him, or did he really try to harm Patricia? She reflected, uncertainty eroding her confidence. After finding the compromising evidence in Roberto's car, Marta acted quickly. First, she contacted the police to show them the bottle and the medical prescription she had found, explaining her suspicions and how they had come to light. The police, considering the seriousness of the evidence, agreed to follow up on the case and promised to go to the scene immediately. As soon as they arrived, Marta returned home, finding Patricia still enjoying the tranquility of the temporary home, unaware of the latest discoveries. "We need to go to the police station, Patricia," I found something very serious that the police need to see, and they will want to hear from you too, Marta explained, trying to prepare her friend for the impact of the revelations that were about to come. The interrogation room at the police station was saturated with palpable tension, the air charged with anticipation of the imminent confrontation. Patricia, sitting rigidly in a metal chair, seemed a shadow of herself, trembling slightly as she awaited Roberto's entry. Marta was by her side, a comforting presence amid the emotional storm. Roberto entered with an arrogant posture, his face masked by calculated calm. Upon seeing Patricia, a brief flicker of excitement passed through his eyes before he regained control, adopting a nonchalant expression. "Patricia, do you really want to involve the police? This is dramatic, even for you?" he began, his voice tinged with sarcasm, attempting to downplay the situation with casual disdain. Patricia, although shocked, found the strength to respond, her voice trembling but driven by growing indignation. "Roberto, they found things in your car, things that would harm me. Tell me it's a mistake. Please say it." With a smile that didn't reach his eyes, cold and unsettling, Roberto leaned slightly toward her. "Patricia, always so sweet and so naively hopeful. Let me clarify it for you so that even you can understand," he said, the feigned patience quickly disappearing. "Yes, I planned everything meticulously. Why would I stay by your side without a benefit? The money from your will would be my freedom." The words hit Patricia like sharp blades, each one cutting deeper than the last. "Why, Roberto? Why do this to me? I loved you," she whispered, tears beginning to run freely down her face. "Love, Patricia? Love is just a tool for people like me, a useful tool to keep blind women like you believing in people like me. It was so easy to deceive you. I just wanted the money. I never really loved you. Everything was going fine until that waitress appeared to ruin it all. I was being so convincing that I even impressed myself with my performance." Roberto responded with cold cruelty, laughing at the pain he saw reflected in her eyes. "I might be arrested, but I still have the right to your money for being your husband. I just wanted to speed everything up and not have to see you anymore, to get what I wanted soon. The money," he finished. The police intervention was immediate, with one of the officers stepping forward. "That's enough. Roberto Carballo, you're under arrest for attempted homicide. You have the right to remain silent," he announced while placing handcuffs on Roberto's wrists. Roberto, however, did not seem disturbed by his imminent arrest. "Look, Patricia, at the end of the day, we all do what we need to survive. I just played the game better than you. Soon I'll be rich with your money. Reporting me won't help," he said arrogantly, his last words as he was escorted out of the room. Devastated, Patricia turned to Marta, seeking comfort from her friend. "How could I have been so blind as not to see who he really was?" she asked, her voice broken by betrayal and pain. However, deep inside, Patricia began to recall all the times Roberto belittled her, mistreated her with words when they were alone, always careful not to do it in public, keeping his image clean. How could he have been so cruel? How did I not realize that this relationship wasn't normal? She asked herself. Marta held Patricia's hand firmly. "Sometimes we want to see the best in the people we love, but now you're safe and that's what matters. He can't hurt you anymore. You're safe and you'll never be alone. You'll always have a friend," said Marta, hugging Patricia. In the days following the confrontation at the police station, the legal process against Roberto was surprisingly swift, given the overwhelming evidence and his own confession during the interrogation. He was convicted of attempted murder and other crimes related to his attempt to poison Patricia. The sentence was severe, reflecting the gravity of his actions. Patricia, though relieved by the verdict, knew there was still one last issue to face before she could close this painful chapter of her life. She asked Marta to accompany her on a visit to the prison where Roberto was being held. Marta, always supportive, agreed without hesitation, understanding the importance of this meeting for Patricia. In the prison, the encounter was filled with palpable tension. Roberto was brought into the visiting room handcuffed and visibly more defeated than the last time they'd seen him. Patricia took a deep breath, searching within herself for the courage to face the man who had nearly taken everything from her. "Roberto," Patricia began, her voice firm, stronger than she felt. "I'm not here for you today, but for myself. I need to say a few things to move forward." Roberto watched her, his gaze now more resigned. "Patricia, he tried to speak, but Patricia interrupted him. "No, Roberto, you no longer have the right to talk about my time or my life. You made your choices, and now you live with the consequences," she said, holding the divorce papers in her hand. "I'm here to tell you that I've divorced you, and more than that, my lawyer used everything you did against me to document the separation. You will have no part of the fortune you so desperately desired," she said. Roberto listened to every word from Patricia as if each one was a blow he couldn't stop. He was furious. However, Patricia continued, now stronger and unafraid. "And there's more, Roberto. During all this time, one person has stood by my side, someone who truly saved me, not just physically but in every possible way, Marta. This incredible woman beside me showed me what it means to have courage and integrity." Marta watched, moved by Patricia's words but not expecting what was to come next. "That's why I've decided that the only person who deserves anything from my fortune is Marta." She turned to the woman beside her. "I'm giving you a substantial amount, Marta, not just as a thank you, but as a recognition of your friendship and companionship," Patricia announced, handing the check to Marta, who was left speechless. Roberto, finally broken, only lowered his head, the reality of his total loss crystal clear. "Don't leave me here, Patricia, please. You don't know how cruel this place is. I can't stay with nothing," he pleaded. But his ex-wife ignored him and turned her back. Patricia and Marta left the prison together, closing one painful chapter as a new one began to open. Outside the cold shadow of the prison, Patricia looked at Marta, her new friend and now the protector of her legacy. "Thank you, Marta, for everything." Marta, holding the check, simply smiled, filled with emotion. "Let's rebuild together, Patricia." After the tumultuous events and painful revelations that had marked their lives, Marta and Patricia emerged not only as strong women but as catalysts for change. Inspired by the painful experience, Patricia and Marta decided to use what had happened and their resources for a greater cause that would help other women become strong and free. Joining forces, Marta and Patricia founded a non-governmental organization dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence. The NGO, named Safe Haven, had the mission of offering support, resources, and legal assistance to women facing situations similar to Patricia's. On a sunny day, Marta and Patricia oversaw the renovation of a large house they had acquired with part of Patricia's fortune. The house would be transformed into a shelter and recovery center for women and their children from violent homes. "Do you think we'll be able to help some women?" Patricia asked, looking at the house, which, with each hammer strike and each brushstroke, was being transformed into a home and a symbol of hope. "I know we will," Marta replied with conviction, taking Patricia's hand. "Every woman we help is a victory. Every story we change is a step toward a better world." As the renovation progressed, Marta and Patricia began working on structuring the programs of the NGO. They would offer everything from psychological counseling sessions to legal assistance, ensuring that the women had not only emotional support but also the means to seek justice and independence. The day of the inauguration arrived, filled with expectations and emotions. The house was full of volunteers, donors, and the local press, all eager to see the fruits of Marta and Patricia's work. The two women cut the red ribbon at the main entrance, officially declaring Safe Haven open. During the event, Patricia gave a moving speech. "This house is more than bricks and mortar. It represents a refuge for those who for too long felt voiceless and without a way out. Here, they will find a safe harbor, a place where they can begin to heal their wounds and rebuild their lives. We cannot change the past, but we can influence the future and ensure that no other woman has to face what I faced." Marta, in turn, spoke about the importance of community and solidarity. "Our strength comes from our unity. Safe Haven is not just the work of Patricia and me, but of everyone here and those who, though not present, support our cause. Every small gesture of support contributes to great change." As the day progressed, many women approached, some with stories similar to Patricia's, others simply wishing to contribute to the movement that the NGO represented. The community forming around Safe Haven was a testament to the impact that Marta and Patricia were already having on the lives of many. With Safe Haven, Marta and Patricia not only rebuilt their own lives, but also gave other women the hope and resources to do the same. Through pain and trials, they found a purpose that elevated and inspired them day after day to continue fighting for a world where domestic violence had no place. Several years had passed since Marta and Patricia had found themselves in the darkest of circumstances. But from that darkness emerged a light that not only illuminated their own paths, but also those of countless other women. The NGO Safe Haven had become more than a shelter. It was a movement, a powerful voice against domestic violence that resonated through conferences and intervention programs across the country. Roberto remained behind bars, a distant shadow that no longer cast its cold over Patricia's life. Meanwhile, Patricia's life flourished in ways she had never imagined. In those dark days, she had found true love, a love built on foundations of respect and mutual understanding. Her new partner, Daniel, met her during a fundraising event for Safe Haven. He was drawn to her strength and dedication to the cause, and together they built a partnership that was both a romantic journey and a shared mission to help others. Marta also found happiness in her personal life. She married Lucas, a volunteer who had come to Safe Haven looking to contribute his management skills. What began as a professional collaboration quickly evolved into something deeper. They shared a commitment to social justice that strengthened their relationship, making them partners in life and activism. Both couples had expanded their involvement with the NGO, using their own experiences to advocate for public policies that protected and empowered women in risky situations. Marta and Patricia continued to be friends, supporting each other. It was more than friendship. They had become family. On an afternoon celebrating the 10th anniversary of Safe Haven, Marta and Patricia were at the center of a large community event. The place was decorated with flags and flowers symbolizing growth and renewal. Children ran across the grass while women who had gone through the program shared their stories of overcoming. Patricia took the stage, the microphone in her hands trembling slightly, not from nerves but from deep emotion. "When I thought my life had come to an end, I found a sister in Marta," she began, her voice clear and strong, projecting over the crowd. "Together, we created a place where fear turns into strength, where silence turns into voice. Safe Haven is not just a place. It is a testament that together, we are unstoppable." Marta joined her, holding her hand. "Each one of you who has walked through our doors has taught us something valuable about courage, about struggle, and about the power of community. Our journey is made up of your stories, your victories," Marta added, her gaze sweeping the crowd, finding faces of women she now knew not just as survivors but as victors. Lucas and Daniel, standing beside the stage, smiled, their eyes shining with pride. Their work had also expanded, with Lucas leading initiatives that involved men in the conversation about domestic violence, educating and changing male perspectives. As day gave way to night, lanterns were lit, and a light ceremony was held. Each lantern represented a life that Safe Haven had touched, each flame a story of darkness transformed into light. As the lanterns rose into the night sky, Patricia and Marta embraced, feeling connected to something greater than themselves. Under the starry sky, they shared smiles and tears, reflecting on the journey they had traveled together. These moments of joy and the memories of the struggles they faced reinforced a silent promise between them to never stop fighting for a better world. This promise, strengthened by the deep friendship they developed, didn't need to be spoken aloud to be real and powerful. They felt that determination in their hearts, ready to face whatever came their way together. If you liked this story, we invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing exciting stories almost every day. Don't miss the next surprising narrative that's about to appear on your screen. We greatly appreciate you being here with us. Now you can click on the links appearing on the screen right now. We have a special selection just for you, full of valuable stories and guaranteed entertainment. See you there.